In 1977, a man named Roch Theriault gathered a group of followers in Quebec to form a commune. He called them the Ant Hill Kids. The early days of the commune were built around holistic health practices. Drawing from Seventh-day Adventist teachings, he mandated a lifestyle free of tobacco, unhealthy food, and worldly sins. But Theriault's authority faced a major test when he predicted the world would end in February 1979. When the date arrived and passed without an apocalypse, members began to question his wisdom. To prevent the group from collapsing, Theriault moved the commune deep into the wilderness of the Gaspé Peninsula. He claimed the timeline of heaven and earth were simply out of sync, using the geography to sever his followers' ties to the outside world. When an apocalyptic prophecy fails, cult leaders often tighten their authoritarian control to prevent defection. For Theriault, the failed end times became a catalyst for a more rigid, isolated structure. To protect the commune from external interference, Theriault registered the Ant Hill Kids as an official church. As this legal flowchart shows, religious status created a barrier for local authorities. Law enforcement jurisdiction essentially bounces off the religious freedom protections surrounding adult commune members. Because members participated voluntarily in a recognized religion, officials lacked legal standing to investigate their primitive living conditions. But one narrow bypass existed: the welfare of children. This allowed social workers to pierce the barrier in 1987, removing 17 minors. However, the adults remained under Theriault's rule. The group's officially recognized religious status created a legal vacuum where his actions went unchecked by the state. Hidden from public view, Theriault's leadership shifted from motivational speeches to physical purification rituals. He began using belt whippings to address what he termed spiritual infractions. Punishments soon escalated to extreme physical violence. Theriault forced members to eat feces or break their own legs with a sledgehammer to prove their devotion. Years of isolation and psychological conditioning left the members unable to resist. They were taught that Theriault was a prophet, and that this physical degradation was a necessary path to ridding themselves of sin. This systematic violence was designed to break individual will. By forcing his followers to participate in their own abuse, Theriault ensured they remained entirely dependent on him for their perceived salvation. Theriault eventually extended his control over the physical health of his followers by proclaiming himself a holy being with the power to heal. To demonstrate this power, he began performing unnecessary and crude amateur surgeries on the members of the commune. He performed unanesthetized circumcisions on both adults and children, using improvised tools in an unsterile environment. He also administered internal treatments, such as injecting a 94% ethanol solution directly into the stomachs of sick followers. By wrapping these acts in the guise of divine medical care, Theriault forced his victims to accept these invasive procedures as spiritual necessities. In 1989, this medical abuse culminated in the death of a follower named Solange Boillard. When Boillard complained of a stomachache, Theriault punched her in the abdomen and administered a crude enema of molasses and olive oil. He then used a knife to cut open her abdomen without anesthesia, removing a portion of her intestines with his bare hands. Boillard died the following day. Claiming he could resurrect her, Theriault ordered his followers to saw open Boillard's skull, where he then defiled her brain. Theriault's absolute power had removed all boundaries. The commune's original focus on holistic health had been entirely replaced by unchecked homicide. The cycle of violence finally began to unravel through the actions of Gabrielle Lavallee. Lavallee had already suffered years of torture, including the removal of a finger and parts of her breast. Following a failed escape attempt, Theriault used a meat cleaver to amputate her arm. Lavallee escaped again and contacted the authorities, providing them with direct testimony of the atrocities occurring within the commune. The physical evidence of her injuries gave law enforcement a clear legal opening. They could finally move past the group's religious protections to investigate a violent crime. Theriault was arrested for assault in 1989. His removal from the compound broke the commune's physical isolation and allowed the legal process to begin. With the leader in custody, investigators safely entered the commune and began the process of interviewing the remaining members. These testimonies exposed the wider scale of the abuse and led police to the shallow grave of Solange Boillard. In 1993, Theriault was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The Ant Hill Kids tragedy highlights how legal protections for religious freedom can be exploited to conceal evidence of violence and physical abuse. It remains a stark example of the human cost of absolute, unchecked power.